Super. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much, everybody, for making sure everybody's where they need to be within Zoom. I am going to welcome everybody to this meeting of the Portland, Maine Board of Education Finance, Operations, and Personnel Committee meeting. It is January 27th, 2025. It is 7:03 p.m. and we are getting started right now. It looks like we have a number of people who are still joining, which is great. I am Sarah Bryden. I'm the chair of the committee. With me, we also have Board Member Opperman, Board Member Lena, and Board Member Noor, all committee members. Let's see, we have Board Chair Lentz with us. We have Student Representative Fitzgerald with us. Thank you. And then we have a number of staff as well. We have Superintendent Scallon. We have Senior Executive Director Strategy, Sarah Warren. We have Facilities Director, Tamara Sweeney. We have Assistant Superintendent for Secondary Schools, Dr. Ahmed. We have Director of Elementary Schools, Dr. Atkinson-Dwina. We have HR Executive Director, Jennifer Slabank, and Facilities Deputy, Scott Watson. I hope I did not butcher your titles or your names, and I hope I didn't miss anybody. So if I did, I invite you to tell me so I get it right next time. Welcome. It's a great group of folks here, and we are going to go over a number of items on our agenda. Let me get to that tab so I can tell everybody about it. Let's see. Okay, so in tonight's 90-minute meeting, we are going to review the CIP for the year, and that's also a voting item. So we'll be voting on the staff recommendation for CIP, which we talked about in our previous meeting. We're going to hear from staff year-to-date financials update, and then we're going to hear, it's the first of a number of topics where we're going to hear from staff the results of some research that they've done around budget impacts to a number of areas. Tonight's going to be crossing guards, middle school CTE expansion, and ESOL certification for staff. So those are the highlights of the agenda for today. I am also going to check and see if we have anybody who might be waiting to give public comment. If there are no... Thank you, Dr. Scallon, for getting to that before. 0 attendees waiting to give public comment. Okay, so I will not read the lengthy protocols for public comment because that's not necessary, and I will close public comment right now. So let's jump into our agenda. And the first item is the CIP approval. So Dr. Scallon, I'll turn it over to you to get us started on that conversation.
Yes, good evening. Thank you. We're excited to present to you for final approval at the Finance Committee. We would then go to 2 reads for the board, our recommended SIP, which is our capital improvement plan. This is based off of feedback that you provided to us last month at the proposal. And so our Director of Facilities, Tamara Sweeney, is here to provide that. Again, this is the one item that we'll actually be asking for a formal vote on tonight. And so, Tamara, if you can just provide an update, and then we will ask for the vote.
Sure. Am I able to share the slides?
You should be able to.
Okay.
I'm going to make you...
He's already co-host.
Okay.
Great. You should be good.
I wonder why it's not letting me see them. Okay. It's not letting me see what I'm going to try and share. So I don't know. Yeah, I'm not able to see I can try and share something. I'm not sure what it's going to be, though, is the problem. I don't know why it's
Tamara, I'll share for you. Give me 1 second.
Yes. Giving me any options. Okay. So good evening, everyone. Thank you for your time tonight. I'm here to present the updated version of our proposal which has been revised based on the valuable feedback we received from you last month. So I'm going to walk you through some changes we made and how they align with both of our immediate needs and long-term goals. So the updated proposal includes a few key adjustments. First, all of our priority 1 items have been retained in the current plan. These are the initiatives we consider most critical. Second, we've deferred the priority 2 and priority 3 items to future capital plans. This will allow us to concentrate our resources on the highest priority needs in the near term, which we believe is the most efficient approach. So the total capital improvement plan submission for FY 2026 is $3 million, and it directly ties into our goals of ensuring safe, warm, and dry environment, which remains our top priority. So we can go to the next slide and just review our priority 1s, which are the same ones we reviewed last month. I don't think we need to go step by step into them unless anybody has questions. We reviewed them pretty in depth last month. So these are the 4 of the building envelope proposals. I think we have another one on the following page. 2 more building envelopes. And then, so those are their 6 building envelope proposals that we're pushing forward in this proposal. And then the next slide is, I believe, an HVAC project that we're going to push forward as a priority 1. And the next slide is our safety and security proposals for Deering High School and Portland High School. And then we have 1 more that's for parking lot and asphalt replacement and repairs. So those are our total projects that we're asking for to push forward as our capital plan this year. And we look forward to getting your approval tonight. So that's that. So there's a couple more. I know from last meeting, we talked about, well, I guess, first of all, these slides are the ones that we decided to not move forward with, that we're going to put into other CIP years or push to the city to budget for. Those were all our priority 2 and priority 3s. And then we also spoke about ADA projects and possibly trying to bring in more ADA projects from our meeting last month. These are the 2 that are in our current plans that have extensive design work and project work that really need to be done on them. And so there are a couple more ADA projects that we should plan for in future years, but I don't feel like it's the time at this point to be adding them to our CIP project due to the 2 that we already have in the works and how long and how much time and effort those will take. So, yes.
Yes, go ahead, Board Member Opperman.
Just a quick question. The ones that were priority 2, the city is actually going to be doing those? No? Yes?
So the 2 that we're talking about, which would be the gym and the playground?
Yes.
Those are the 2. So we're pushing back to the city that they're doing the project and that should be part of the project.
Okay.
I'm not saying that it's going to be approved. I don't know that.
Okay.
Yes, that's our plan.
Thank you.
Board Member Lena, go ahead.
Thank you. I had a question. I'm looking at the document that was shared on board docs that's called the FY 2026 Capital Improvement Plan Proposal. It's like a table.
Mm-hmm.
And there are 2 items for Deering High School. One is providing a secure entrance and ADA accessible front entrance. And then the phase 2 masonry repairs. Were those on the slides that Dr. Scallon was showing?
Yes.
And one of them, I know that you said in your introduction that you were going to focus on the priority 1.
So you're asking about the masonry because it's a priority 2?
Yes.
So The reason that the masonry is getting pushed forward is because we currently have right now $500,000 for the masonry phase 1. And I've already started the design work on that phase. And so we know how much more money we're going to need and to continue that project. Just for the flow of the project, we're asking for that to be part of this proposal. But yes, you're right.
So to make sure that I understand, that is a priority too, but it's in the bucket of the $3 million because it's essentially more efficient to just keep going with the priority one that it had been. Correct? Okay.
Yep. Yep. Sorry, I wasn't more clear on the slides.
That's okay. That's why we're having a conversation. I appreciate the clarification. Any other questions about the information that we just learned? All right. I would look to committee members for a motion to approve the presentation and move it forward. Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Could I have a second? Thank you, Board Member Noor. And so I'm going to just ask for a show of hands if for committee members, if you want to approve the CIP presentation to move forward to the full board. It is unanimous. Thank you so much. I really appreciate all of the time, energy, and effort that went into the review of all the work needs to be done, putting all of that information together in a digestible format for us, and then your patience with all of our questions. So thank you so much.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, so we will be, that will be coming up in a full board meeting upcoming. Dr. Scallon, should we move to year-to-date financials?
Yes, so year-to-date financials are available on board docs. Because tonight is a packed agenda, we will not be going through it, but you have them there. If there are any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to me. And if it is something that is worth sort of sharing with the broader group, I will certainly do that at either the next Finance Committee meeting or at the board meeting on Tuesday.
Can I just ask a really quick question? A quick high-level question about that. Just curious if the information that is on board docs tracks along with the patterns that we had been seeing in previous monthly year-to-date financial reviews.
Yes, it does. There's nothing there that's a change where you see continued sort of ebbs and flows. It has to do with reporting timing of revenue. And so there's nothing there that in my review or in the review with the finance team raised any concerns relative to the past trends that we were seeing.
Okay, thank you.
And then, Chair, if it's all right with you, I'm going to do a short just reminder and framing for the 3 topics tonight. And then I will pass it to Dr. Warren, who will do our first topic.
That sounds great. I also want to clarify in terms of, that's 3 really substantial topics that I'm looking at on the agenda, and being mindful, it is already 7:15 in the evening. People have, lives, and I want to make sure that we can wrap up by 8:30. Just in terms of the structure of the conversation, would you like us to hold our questions, make notes, and then ask questions all at the end?
Yes. So you sort of beat me a little bit of my talking piece. So I really appreciate it. No, it's great, Chair. So yes. So one is, I think of this as a follow-up to questions that the board had asked for, or the committee had asked for at a previous meeting. And it won't be the last time that we talk about these topics. And so this is really us following up and determining whether or not this is something where the committee wants us to go even further, or if this is enough information to say either, yes, let's put that in the budget or the initial proposal, or let's pause on it for now. And so this is not something where we need to wrestle it exhaustively, but instead to give us initial sort of feedback on it. And so for each of this, for my piece, I'd love for you to just hold questions. And then for the other 3, I'd love for you to jot them down as we're going. And then we'll take clarifying questions and then feedback at the end. And that way we can get through all 3 presentations. And then just for staff, just so that they're prepared, I will be presenting these slides, and then everybody will drive their slides as we're going through. All right, let me just get this percent-wise up a little bit. All right. And down a little. All right, so tonight we're providing an analysis of 3 topics that the Finance Committee requested. As Chair Bryden said at the beginning, we'll be talking about crossing guards, middle school CTE, and ESOL credentials. And then you can see the topics in February and in March listed below. For those who are really taking notes and following closely our committee meetings, changes from fiscal year 24 to 25 was originally a topic that was scheduled to be discussed tonight. We moved that to February as I am continuing my weekly meetings with school staff. So myself, Carrie Dowdy, president of the PEA, Jen Cooper, president of the EdTech Union, and when available, Ellen LaChapelle have been going to each of the schools and having conversations. And I would say that we're about 2/3 to 3/4 of the way through. And so we want to finish those before presenting on this topic. In alignment with our strategic plan, there was investment in school climate support in FY25, and we continue to review the impact of that investment. This seems to be particularly important to just acknowledge in light of the topics that have come up in our district over the last couple of weeks. And so what you see here on the slide is the FY 2025 investments, including overall cost, as well as the incremental cost that happened this year. So overall, the district this year has budgeted around $5.5 million to staff mental health supports in schools. This is guidance counselors, social workers, other mental health supports. That represents an increase of 8 staff at a cost of just about $750,000. School climate, we have $1.6 million in staffing for school climate coordinators. These positions previously existed at the middle school, but grant funding had expired. And so there was an increase of $340,000 overall, and all of these expenses now sitting on the local budget. Funding for school climate isn't just about folks who respond to climate needs and climate supports, but it's also about making sure that students feel and are supported to be academically successful. And so I named below it also 2 additional investments that where we believe if we do it well and we see improved outcomes academically for students, we'll also see improved climate for students. And so special education staffing intervention programming, we had a 1.9% budget around special education coordinators at each school that has above 300 students. That was an increase of $600,000. And in academic supports, we had $1.9 million in staffing, $100,000 in training, $50,000 in materials, all for support reading intervention this year. Beyond these initial investments, we're looking at strategies in our strategic plan to make sure that we're maintaining safe and joyful schools. And the strategic plan work includes the work that is happening at our elementary, middle, and secondary schools around social emotional learning. Second is around making sure that we have collectively and at each school a clear vision around what is strong school climate. And we have that work happening both with our network directors of school climate as well as with their counterparts at the school level. And then one thing that you will see in this year's budget is a further investment around community schools and further building out of positive student engagement, which is things including enrichment, but is also around the 4 pillars, of community schools, which is around integrated student supports, active family engagement, collaborative leadership, and expanded enrichment learning opportunities. And so I share that just because I know it's top of mind, but I wanted to share both where we have already made investments this year, as well as some of the thinking moving forward. I don't have tonight a proposal or an ask for you around this, but it's an area where we continue to have discussions as staff. And so with that, I'm going to turn to our first topic of the night, which is Dr. Warren, who's going to share some of the work around the crossing guards, the crossing guard contract, and the best way and most cost efficient and effective way to manage crossing guards in our district. Oops.
Can you see the slides now? Okay, great. Good evening, everybody. Good to see you all. All right, so I'm going to dive right in. I'm presenting 3 different options here, but to be perfectly honest, I could have probably taken each of these off in another direction or two. There are lots of different kind of tangents we could go down, and different ways we could spin each one. So this isn't an exhaustive exploration of options, but I think it's kind of getting at the 3 primary options, and we can, as Dr. Scallon said, explore more if needed, but this is our sort of best analysis to date. So option 1 would be to, let me back up and just say, currently we're contracting our crossing guards. And the question asked by the board was whether perhaps we should consider bringing the crossing guard function into the district and the management of that work. And so that's what we're exploring. So one possibility would be to bring it in-house and have our schools be responsible. Not every school has crossing guards, but our elementary schools do, and King Middle School does. So if we were to pursue this option, we would allocate funds in the budget for each of these schools according to the need in their respective neighborhoods. And then they would be responsible for directly recruiting, hiring, and managing the guards. I think in order to have some consistency in terms of approach and safety and whatnot, we would try to have some centralized guidance and support for training. But we would leave the day-to-day management all to the schools. And then one of the things to note there is that if there's an absence, which there often is because that's just what happens, the schools would be the ones responsible in this case for finding a replacement. So in each of these options, I'll walk you through some pros and some cons, give you some budget implications, and then ultimately at the end share the recommendation that we've come to. So for this one, if we were to have schools manage this, one of the advantages is that the schools would be encouraged to really make the crossing guard position a part of their own school community. I will note that I think a lot of the schools already do that, even though they don't manage the guards, but this would sort of give an added push in that direction. And would also encourage and sort of empower, maybe embolden schools to more actively integrate guards into their learning activities and team building events. One of the cons is that this would then kind of fragment the program. It would end the district-wide quality control that currently exists with the oversight by the vendor. And then sub-management could be, I think, challenging for schools to have to deal with that on top of the other subs they have to find for teachers and ed techs and others. It does, in this case, it would add another management responsibility to folks that I think are fairly taxed already. Budgetarily, again, I had to kind of work with what I had and make some assumptions, but this is partly based on what the current vendor is doing, and so trying to align, roughly speaking, to that. So we made the assumption of $23 an hour, which is also similar to what we would see in a bus assistant or cafeteria worker roles if we looked at our base contract as an example. And they currently have 31 guards. So if we sustain that same number times 3 hours a day and 180 days of school, and that would total about $385,000. So in some cases, it's possible that maybe a school would want to hire someone who has another role already, such as a lunch aide or a cafeteria worker. And this could tip us up into a space where the employee is working enough hours to receive benefits. And so we would need to account for that as well. So in those situations, the added cost of benefits for each of those people would probably run about $8,000 to $12,000. And then we would want to set aside some money for materials and supplies and training. This is not a magic number. I was just sort of guessing what we might spend based on some of the supplies I've seen the company using. I am imagining that our liability costs would go up. I did not go so far as to ask our insurance agent about this because it felt premature to do that. But we do have a requirement in our contract right now that they have, that the company has liability costs covered for insurance themselves. So I would imagine we would take more of that on. And so without having an exact number, it looks to me like this would come out probably around the 400,000 range that we're currently paying. And that doesn't really take into account some of the management behind the scenes, folks that would end up needing to support this, like principals, assistant principals, and probably some folks at the central level. So the second option would be, again, to bring the management of crossing guards in-house, but in this case, try to centralize it more. And again, this isn't necessarily the only way of doing it, but it was the most logical place we could think of if we were going to bring it centrally, would be to tie it to the transportation office. So if we did it this way, then that would just become one of the things that office manages in addition to buses and vans. That is not something that team currently has the capacity to do, either in terms of, I think, staff time, nor in terms of expertise. So my suggestion is that if we were going to try to do that and manage the whole thing district-wide, we would probably need to add a manager to that team to lead. It would probably look a fair amount like the model that currently runs under the vendor. It's just that everything would be done by us internally. So all the training, the day-to-day supervision, the person would have to be on top of getting subs, and then monitoring and reporting. So the pro to this would be centralized control and direct control over the hiring and training and management of the crossing guards. The con is that I think at the moment, we've done a huge amount of work over the past year plus to really invest in the transportation office, build a strong new management team, start putting new standard operating procedures in place, and added new technology to our buses, which we're still working with, learning how to use that to make our work more efficient and safe. So we still have a number of things that we're working on in that sort of improvement process, and so this would be adding another thing, I think, at an inopportune time. And we would need to build the expertise to know how to really lead crossing guards, since we're not actually experts in doing that yet. And again, just sort of the added management burden and costs there. The budget implications, the assumption would be probably similar costs to in option one in terms of the staffing costs. But then I would add in probably about an $80,000 cost for a manager, which would include salary and benefits. So probably this one would end up being more expensive than the current contract, based on that estimate. Third option is that we continue to contract the guards, and in this case, the current contract that has been around now for a few years is with the crossing guard company. This could be renewed. That's what the contract terms say, And we did this past year, but we negotiated and brought them down significantly from what they had proposed as a rate. If I recall right, it was about $589,000 they were asking for, and we negotiated a different contract down to $400,000. And also have really worked hard to build more accountability and communication and partnership with them. Fairly successfully, they've been quite responsive. So if we contracted it again with a crossing guard company, presumably we could again negotiate an agreed upon rate. The responsibility then really sits with them, and we would just continue to manage the contract. I should have updated this number to make it consistent with above. The site figure is kind of confusing. So it's actually 31 people that they're currently employing. And I think we would stick with a similar level for now anyway. So pros, again, they bring expertise that we don't currently have. It's not to say that we couldn't build it, but at the moment they've got it and we don't. It definitely reduces an immediate management burden on us by being able to sort of delegate this to the vendor. And so it feels like a fairly cost-effective way to, relatively speaking, to have this important body of work managed. And I think that, again, a lot of the guards, I believe, are already part of their school communities and much loved in their school communities, but technically they are not our employees, and therefore they are a little bit separate from us as a district. So in terms of budget implications, we could go ahead with the current contract and negotiate that. If we went out to bid, it would sort of, throw things up in the air a little bit. We might get a better deal, but we might not. We might end up with a more expensive contract. And in general, I think that the costs are always dependent on how many guards we decide to have. That is really primarily what drives the budget totals. The management burden at the central and school levels is relatively low under this option. So our recommendation at this point is to continue on, at least for this next year, with the contracting model for a number of the reasons that I just shared. I think, again, we're at a place where there's lots of other stuff going on in terms of our strategic plan and a lot of the improvement initiatives we're running. And I'm not convinced that right now is a great time to shift the model, but we're very open to that conversation and interested to hear feedback from you. And, perhaps there are questions or other areas and avenues here you'd like us to further explore, which we're also happy to do. And with that, I will stop sharing, and I think we're going to go on to the next topic.
Thank you, Dr. Warren. Our next topic is middle school CTE programming, and Dr. Ahmed is going to present.
Just give me a second. I'm finding my. Oh. Do you see my screen?
Yes, I can see it, but could you make it a little bit bigger, please?
Okay, let me see a slideshow.
Super. Thank you. That's great.
Good evening. I will be talking to you about the expansion of the CTE programming to the middle schools. And just for some background, there was a law enacted or passed by the state legislation, Chapter 1721, public law, that addressed actually the expansion of career and technical education to include students from grade 6 to 8. So the spirit of that law is all Maine middle school students will be provided access, which is developmental appropriate CTE middle to all of them. The state is working and providing more guidance and framework for the law. So although it was passed in 2017, there is a process now, administrative procedure going on under Chapter 233 to develop framework for the implementation of the law. So there are some limitations when it comes to the expansion of the CTE programming for the middle school students, from curriculum development to hands-on materials and instructor or instructional team training. There was a pilot program that was run for 33 students last summer, and with the funding that was obtained by PATH through the MELMAC Foundation. These programs were limited because, as you know, PATH is a regional school with several school districts sending their students. So the number of middle school students in that from the sending districts is about 4,300 middle schoolers. So that is a very large number to provide this this program. So option one is for funding, and talking about funding is to wait for the state to release the applications for the state funding for the CTE programs for the middle schools. And that has its own benefits or pros, and also some disadvantages or cons here. So potential to reach a wide audience across the schools and support and align with state workforce and education goals. So if we wait for that grant, and when the state releases the applications, the benefit is that we'll be aligned with the spirit and what the state is looking for. And there are some cons where we will be depending on when the state releases the grant or the applications, and the application of many regional schools may apply, and that may reduce the funding and the allocations. And funding may be short-term, raising concerns about how we sustain. There is another option to put the funding in our local budget, and that this is an estimate that last year for 33 students, it costed $25,000 that we got from MELMAC Foundation. So if we give the opportunity to 100 students, we estimate about $75,000 for 10 days CTE experience. It has this option has great flexibility in budgeting and planning and adjusting the programs to meet the local needs. No wait time for state funding and state applications. And it is easier to tailor programs, content and structure for specific needs of our community. It has local budget may be constrained as a disadvantage of this, and limiting the scope and or the quality of the program. The staff's recommendation at this time is to wait for the state directives. We recommend we wait for the finalized Department of Education rule, Chapter 232, before proceeding with this program. and potentially the revised rule of this chapter 232 will offer a clear and standardized framework for implementing the CTE in the middle schools across Maine, and ensuring the programs meets the expectation of the spirit of the law. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Ahmed. We're going to now pass to Dr. Atkinson-Duena for a follow-up around ESOL credentialing.
Hey, good evening, everyone. I just want to give some background information before going into our options and proposals. Just a reminder that our services to multilingual students are governed by the LAU plan and federal and state regulations. So a simplified version of these service requirements are basically that for our access level 1 and level 2 students, that they should receive 2 periods a day of language development instruction provided by a teacher of English to speakers of other languages, or ESOL, and that access level 3 and 4 students should receive 1 period a day of language development instruction provided by an ESOL teacher. And those stipulations are in our LAU plan, but they are also in the federal and state regulations. A little bit different. Our LAU plan, which is just our own Portland Public Schools, the way we've designed our plan stipulates that we will follow a similar model for pre-K. For pre-K, there are not the same regulations or guidance around what kind of model you provide. So we do have a little bit of some flexibility there, but for most of our pre-K students, we've said that they should receive 2 periods a day of language development instruction provided by an ESOL teacher. And then the other background information, just to remind some of you and maybe just give others of you an overview, is that there was a June 2023 resolution that directed the superintendent to support teachers to become effective educators of multilingual learners. And there are 4 main directives that are part of that resolution. The first one is that we would offer credentials for non-ESOL teachers, that we would create a program, that we would make progress within 4 years, in which all non-ESOL educators acquire some form of an ESOL credential, either through an ESOL 660 endorsement. The 660 is the number with the Maine Department of Education, what they call that certification. Or through some embedded professional learning, through micro-credentials, so that we have those options, that we prioritize recruiting, supporting, and retaining multilingual educators. as well as support the existing educators to acquire additional languages. And that resolution also indicated that the board would commit to providing the resources and support necessary to ensure all educators in PPS have or acquire some form of ESOL credential, certification, or micro-credential, and then that there would be an annual progress report to the board. And just to highlight something here is that if you noticed in the LAU plan that requires that instruction to be given by an ESOL certified teacher, not all of our credential options would meet that requirement, right? So even though those credentialing options may help educators to learn how to meet the needs of multilingual students better, they would not be able to fill the need of providing those required services to our multilingual students. And we do experience some gaps, particularly at the elementary level, and being able to comply with that. Secondary, at the high school particularly, seems to not have too many gaps. Middle school level has maybe a few problem areas that we've identified, but we do see a few gaps at the elementary level. So I just wanted to give you a couple of options here. One would be to continue offering a variety of credentialing opportunities. This is pretty much what we do now. I'm calling this the offer it and they will enroll scenario. So we have elevation strategies, which are a set of modules through a program elevation that we use to manage our learning plans for ESOL learners. And they also have these modules that help educators with strategies that support multilingual learners in language development. We have through WIDA, which is the consortium that we are a part of for our language development testing called Access. They also provide some asynchronous PD modules, which we have used. I think particularly at pre-K has used some of those. We've also developed some courses that educators in our system can take. One of them that will be offered in the spring is called Culturally Responsive Teaching for Multilingual Learners, and that will be offered for 45 salary contact hours through the collective bargaining agreement. We are also offering Spanish and Portuguese courses for staff as world languages. And then we do cover the costs of UMF or USM courses that count towards ESOL certification over and above what's included in the collective bargaining agreement. So just to continuing, just to go over some of the pros and cons of this option, we do see that it supports the goal of increasing knowledge and practices for serving our multilingual students. Staff can set their own pace. They don't feel pressure to do more than they would like to do. And the budget, the impact on budget is kind of limited and flexible depending on what we decide to commit to it. The cons are that there are limited incentives and no requirements. Whenever there is staff turnover, there's like learning loss from our system. And so we do see that. We don't feel like this helps us to address the challenges of providing all multilingual services, all multilingual students with the appropriate extent of services, because we would really need to increase our numbers of ESOL certified teachers to be able to do that. And we also don't believe that this will help us to progress at the desired pace that was set in the resolution. But for funding, this is about what we've committed to it this past year. $67,000 would keep us at the status quo. We this year have invested $30,000 in covering courses towards 660 endorsement, which pays for about 18 graduate courses, or the complete endorsement for approximately 4 to 6 people, estimating that they might have 3 to 5 courses to take in order to get that ESOL 660 endorsement. We also invest in elevation strategies, the set of modules that teachers can take to learn about strategies for addressing multilingual learners. The WIDA modules are provided at no cost with our participation in that consortium. And then for covering the cost of the courses in Spanish and Portuguese, and the other one around responsive teaching for multilingual learners, that costs about $7,000. So another option that we've considered, there could be more, but was to increase our summer options for training by offering a SIOP model training and launching some ESOL and 660 cohorts. So in addition to the credentialing options available already in option 1. So the SIOP model, which stands for Sheltered Immersion Observation Protocol model, is an evidence-based model that supports educators in understanding and applying strategies that support language development in the content areas. As for the cohorts, we think that this might be appealing to groups of teachers, and we know that there are some target populations where it would really help with our strategy to get more people certified as ESOL teachers. So we've identified some groups at the elementary level, and also some of our schools where we have high percentages of multilingual learners in the buildings. Some of the pros and cons here is that this continues to support the goal of increasing knowledge and practices for serving our multilingual students. Staff still can set their own pace. We do hope that targeted cohorts where colleagues can learn together may increase the appeal of getting the 660 endorsement, and also having some of these opportunities in the summer would make it easier for our admin or school leaders to participate, creating opportunities for some leadership there. Some of the cons, there are limited incentives and no requirements with these models. And we also think that it's unlikely to address the challenges of providing all multilingual students with the appropriate extent of services. And we would make a modest rate of progress. And we've estimated about $147,000 with this option. This is increasing our investment in ESOL courses from the $30,000 to $90,000. So it would allow us to cover about 60 graduate courses, or could lead to endorsement for 12 to 20 people. And that might be all 18 of our pre-K teachers, for instance, or if we were to have focus on our 4th and 5th grade teachers at the elementary school, so in schools with high populations of multilingual learners. So those are some options that we've considered. And then this also adds in the $20,000 for a SIOP summer workshop that would be available. Another consideration that I'd like to bring forward is the possibility of offering some incentives that could support progress and enable a greater impact. So I have identified some priorities for ESOL certification. We believe that these are some key areas where if we had more teachers that were certified, it would help us meet our LAU plan requirements, and it would also help grow our teachers' skill and capacity to meet multilingual learners' needs. So at the pre-K level, at fourth and fifth grade level, our English language art teachers at the middle level, and then some of our special education teachers in our specialized programs would also be helpful. And just some possible incentives that we've discussed as options that we could use here. So per the collective bargaining agreement, when training is required, then we would pay these targeted educators the per diem rate for taking courses in the summer. Another option might be to offer a course completion bonus. And then some other options that would require negotiation through the PEA contract would be to develop hiring and retention and endorsement incentives into the collective bargaining agreement. And I'm just suggesting, since that would be kind of a trial, that we add $35,000 to develop and add these course taking incentives that would help to build our team of ESOL certified educators, and that would be a total of $182,000, for example. And then I think that's wraps it up.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, all three of you. Lots and lots of information, and we have exactly 32 minutes to ask our clarifying questions and give you some feedback. So I will open the floor for folks that have clarifying questions about crossing guards, CTE expansion in middle schools, and ESOL certification. Board Member Lena, kick us off.
Thank you. I had a question about the ESOL certification. And both options in the cons list, they both had this same bullet point that said unlikely to address challenges of providing all ML students with the appropriate extent of services. So I found that concerning that both options were unlikely to address the need. What are there options that you didn't present that are likely to address those needs?
We're looking at, it is essentially a staffing challenge, because if you're trying to provide 2 periods of instruction a day to multilingual learners, if you just kind of comes to pure math as far as like how many blocks do you need to provide in English language development, and how many staff do you have? I would say like what we've looked at whenever we did our review in the fall of where we were meeting it, the places where we were experiencing some problems, what it would look like is, let's say a child should have 10 blocks a day in language development. So there might be one day where that child only receives 1 block of language development. So we're kind of almost there, but not quite. Wednesday with the reduced schedule also creates some problem trying to just meet the scheduling requirements there. And the other thing that we've seen, and there has been like over in recent years an increase in ESOL staff, is that with the increase of multilingual learners at access levels 1 and 2, then that requires a lot more services because they require 2 blocks a day. So we've increased there. What we really would like to do is if we had regular educators who were also dual certified, then they could provide those ESOL language development services as in the regular classroom as well. So, and right now, whenever we look at that, we only have at the elementary level, and I'm less familiar with what it looks like at the high school level or the secondary level, but we have about 3 teachers right now that are dual certified, like regular ed teachers, and many of them So most of our ESOL certified teachers are actually ESOL teachers and not just in the regular education classroom. So I would say, if we really to address that, and we are making proposals as far as like looking at how many staff we would actually need to be able to meet that, but that we will propose in the budget. But we also should think about this model of having educators dual certified, because then it would release some of our ESOL teachers from providing direct services all the time. They might be able to do coaching. They might be able to support our classrooms teachers in providing that instruction. And so it would give us a lot more options if we could do that. But in order to address that issue, we really do need to focus on the 660 endorsement. And even we have all these other options of micro-credentials and learning opportunities, but they don't really address that particular problem that we're facing. They address the issue of helping people to learn more, helping people to improve their skills, but they don't really address that particular issue. So.
Board Member Opperman, you're up next, but I also just realized that in the last couple minutes, I realized I think we should stick with the ESOL credentialing topic. So if you have questions about that at this point, rather than bouncing around between the 3 different topics, that'd probably be best. Oh, you're muted.
There we go. I have questions in a couple areas, but yeah, I do have one on the ESOL. How much time does it take a already regular ed certified teacher to get the 660? How many hours of classroom time? How many, one course at a time, 5 years, 2 years?
Well, I mean, it's different for, we have estimated that it would take, would require somebody to take 3 to 5 courses to get their endorsement, depending on what courses they've had previously or what their program was before. I did apply to get my ESOL endorsement, and I have 2 courses to take. So if I can, I think doing that in the summer is probably easier for a lot of people, but they can go as fast as they would like. Our collective bargaining pays for about, in most cases, one course a semester. So adding some additional funds into the budget, as we have done this year and proposing next year, allows us to help educators to, continue their progress, kind of beyond the rate that's provided for in their collective bargaining agreement.
I wonder if we use USM or UMF, are those off-campus, off-site courses? I wonder if we had on-site courses in the summer with large cohorts, maybe working with some summer school kids, maybe it's, a self-design type thing. Maybe, figuring out the expenses, hello, but that might, crank it up a little bit, just as a thought. I don't know. I'm sure you thought of that, but
we have had a couple conversations with various universities, and they've run in different, modes. But they are very much open to how we would like to working with us into how we would like to design it. So, yeah. And I like the idea of, having opportunity to learn and also have the kind of practical experience as well. If the summer might offer that.
Mm-hmm. I have questions for other things, but if somebody else has it. So.
Yeah, we're going to go to Board Member Noor, and then I also have some questions about this topic. So go ahead.
Yes, I had a question about the CEOP model training and the $20K that was going to be budgeted for that. Does that $20K cover the administrative and peer leaders that would be coming, or is that an estimate of how much the training itself would be?
So it would cover the cost for about 20 to 30 people to take the course over the summer. And we would contract for the organization that runs the courses to come in and offer that for us. Yeah.
So I have a couple of questions. Towards the beginning of your slides, I noted that you were explaining that ESOL blocks are not required for pre-K students, but as part of our district's policies, we try to make that happen. And I want to confirm what I think is probably true, even though it's not a requirement. It's a really good investment in terms of making sure that kiddos go into kindergarten, first grade, second grade, able to learn and sort of like with a leg up. Is that why I think that in pre-K?
I think it is a good investment. It's not the only way that I think that we could develop language in pre-K students. And, we do have dedicated ESOL teachers at the pre-K level. One of the challenges there is that you have like 0.3 at one school and then 0.4 in another. And I think it's really hard to have an impact in that way. But yes, we have some great pre-K DLL teachers is what we call them. So, and they have great expertise. One, I think the other piece that we see a need at that early level, especially with access level 1 and 2 students, is also a need for like multilingual ed techs. So just having someone who speaks the child's language, especially whenever they are just entering our schools, it can be quite a disruptive challenge, transition into new language, new culture, new everything. And so I think many people would also, like our students would benefit from that as well.
Yeah. Well, so I don't have to ask my question now about edtechs. Thank you for addressing that. My last question for this topic is around the slide with the incentives. I think it's a great thing to be pursuing. I think what you were saying resonated a lot in terms of, being able to make progress at the pace we need to make progress. Incentives are a huge part of that. My question has to do with whether, and I'm not sure if this is possible, which is why it's a question. I'm curious if it's possible to embed those incentives within the existing pay structure, the steps and all that. And I say that because as I was reading the slide with the bonuses, I was thinking, oh my goodness, the complexity around ADP. We've talked before about, that and Maine PERS and what is Maine PERS eligible and what is not. So I'd be curious about whether it's possible to have the certifications embedded into the existing structure.
So I would love to see that. And in fact, most of, districts that have really made good progress, I know you familiar with, many districts have gone after, have tried this initiative where they have all educators dual certified. We cannot find a district that has been able to do that without having it a part of their collective bargaining agreement or some kind of, so there's collective bargaining agreements, but also in other states, the state policy context is very different where, if you have one ESOL student in your class, you would be required to be certified as an ESOL teacher. Maine does not have that same policy context. So we would be relying on, our bargaining agreement with educators, but we have not seen another district that has been able to make that progress without either having the state policy context for it or it worked into the collective bargaining agreement.
Thank you for that. Before we move on to our next topic for questions, I just want to give all the committee members and Chair Lance, if she would like to, the opportunity to just lightning round feedback if you feel like you have strong feedback that you want to give right now that was not reflected in the questions that you asked. Okay. Thank you very much, Dr. Atkinson-Duena. Let's move to CTE expansion in middle school. Dr. Aberman, go ahead.
This is a topic close to my heart. One question I have, Dr. Ahmed, is you mentioned that whatever we do, it would make sense to wait for the Rule 232, so we don't waste energy and all. Do you have any idea how long it's going to take them to do that? How long have they been working on it, and how long are they going?
Yeah, I do not have exactly how long it took them. The law passed actually 2017, but as updated department website, they were talking about revisions are on the rule are currently underway according to the administrative procedures. So that is what is updated. A website on this topic is stating that it is underway now, but I can find out more information by contacting the DOE.
It just made so we'd have some kind of a feel of when it might come into play here. CTE coming into the middle schools is important in that we lost all of the what was called home economics and tech ed kinds of hands-on STEM type courses. And I just wonder, in absence of clarity from the state, whether thinking about incorporating, or what kinds of courses could be offered to middle school students in rotation, computer education, nutrition, food service, and some kind of, I know they do some engineering. I was visiting King that day, that, they had this really cool setup with the STEM setup, but making that more aligned with what kind of the general CTE of high school ideas. So just a thought I had there and wanted to share. There was the other question is, do we have to supply it all middle schools? You mentioned how many middle schools were in the sending schools to paths, but we wouldn't, as a district, have to supply to all the middle schools.
No, we don't, but as the way the regional school is governed, also there will be a level of coordination if they also need their students to access. And so that's why I was saying, like, we need to be like coordinating with them. If they found some grants, and if we find some, and or they have a planning, and we have a planning, so we need to coordinate. And this is really like what Mr. Stilfen was he's spearheading to find out and to be a lead in this area.
I would just be interested to know what I saw at King and as I visit the other middle schools, what kinds of things kind of fit into his idea of CTE. And that would be something I could ask him, I'm sure, myself. But that was it. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. Bryden, we cannot hear you.
Thank you. Okay, so I just have a couple of questions. I want to confirm what middle schoolers have in terms of CTE access currently. Is it nothing? Is it zero?
CTE, meaning like access to our regional school, zero now. Yeah.
Are within the middle school day, it sounds like there's maybe some really cool stuff happening at King. Is it does it vary by middle school in terms of what middle school students might have in terms of an opportunity to interact with these concepts?
The experiences vary, yes.
Okay. Okay. And then I just wanted to confirm that the staff recommendation in terms of waiting for more guidance from the state would mean no budget impact for fiscal year 26, correct?
Yes.
Okay, super. Any other questions on this topic before we open it up to lightning round of feedback? Okay, I will just say I think the recommendation is a sound one for a number of reasons. So I really appreciate all the information and the distillation and the recommendation. Anybody else want to offer feedback on this before we move on to crossing guards? Okay. All right. Questions about crossing guards? Board Chair Lentz, go ahead.
Yeah. Dr. Warren, do we know how many schools it is that don't have a crossing guard already looped into some other role within the school?
As far as I know, most of them do not have a second job in the school, but I'd have to go and do some research to figure that out. Like the one at Rowe that was just recently hired as a lunch aide there, and so very much already a part of that community. But yeah, I'd have to do a survey to figure out how many of them actually, or I guess we could look in ADP to figure out how many. We haven't actually done that analysis.
Okay. I might be interested in that, but I think it depends on kind of like how the rest of this conversation goes. Yeah, thank you for that.
Other questions? I have a couple of questions. Curious about whether it's expected or likely that the boundaries committee work might shift some of the crossing guard need, or is it, if that happens, is it likely to be negligible in terms of dollars and cents?
I don't expect it to make a huge difference. That's not to say that it couldn't at all. Mm-hmm. One of the other things that we are doing, we presented some of this to the Boundaries Committee, but we're working on it more internally as staff, is trying to really dig in more to what we call our hazard zones, which are the areas where we bus students across major streets in order to keep them safe. So, for example, we bus a lot of students, actually many students in the East and West Ends, just because of the busy streets around there. And so one of the things we're wrestling with is whether we should maybe decrease our hazard zones and increase the number of crossing guards and encourage more walking and take some of the strain off of the bus, our transportation system and buses. Or maybe in the other direction, in some cases, maybe we'd rather reduce a crossing guard here and there and actually do more busing. And it's not the easiest of calculations to make because you can pretty easily calculate what a crossing guard costs, but it's a lot more complicated to figure out what the impact is if you then move a bunch of students on or off a bus. It becomes much more complicated. So I've been trying to work on that with the transportation team, but we've had a rough few weeks of people being sick and driver shortages. So that keeps kind of pushing that exercise back a little bit. But I think that's probably more likely to affect the numbers, but I'm not sure in the end that it's going to necessarily, certainly we would be looking at the cost implications in both directions. But yeah, so that could actually either take our cost for crossing guards up or down, depending on which way we decided to go.
Okay, thank you. I have another question that I need to start. So board member Lena, go ahead.
This isn't a question, it's more just a comment about the different options for crossing guards. And I would say, just with my experience working in the schools, I would be hesitant to pass this on to the school leadership just because they're so overwhelmed with assigning subs every day. And it, especially, you know, the crossing guards need to be there before school starts. And I think it just would be really challenging to have that be the option.
Yeah, thank you for that perspective. And so my question actually has to do with so I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because we are specifically talking about this from the perspective of fiscal year 26. But I just generally would like to get your thoughts, Dr. Warren, and also maybe Dr. Atkinson-Twina, your thoughts might be useful as well in terms of whether in the medium term, within a few years, whether there might be the capacity at the school level to be able to consider bringing this, you know, but the slide that was talking about having crossing guards being part of the school community just seemed to offer a lot of climate related benefits that are tough to put a dollar amount on. Also completely understand what Board Member Lena is saying about current capacity. So I wanted to get your thoughts about, you know, if you have a crystal ball and can predict the next several years, whether it's a feasible, possible thing to, you know, sort of be looking to as a goal.
Yeah. So, I mean, I have a few thoughts on that. One is that, and, you know, I thought about this quite a bit as I was trying to pull this together, that I mean, in some cases, that person is already a part of the community. Like I know that the person that's up at Congress and North in the East End is very much a part of the East End Community School community, even though that's not, you know, technically our employee. So I think in some cases, the crossing guards are very much connected to their communities already. And so I don't think that we necessarily need to wait for formally integrating them in, you know, as employees. That doesn't necessarily have to be the precursor to us working harder to help them be part of those communities. That's something we could probably work on already with our contractor. And like I said, in some cases that seems to already exist, but I can't say that since I've, you know, taken this over in the past several months, have really made that a priority to even figure out where that doesn't seem to be the case. So that's one thing. In terms of the feasibility of potentially moving it into schools at some stage, I mean, if we made it a priority and if the board wanted it to be so, then like we would figure out how to make it so. I tend to agree with board member Lena that it's a fairly risky thing to add that to the plates of our school leaders. It's already a lot for them to manage the daily sub issues that they have for classrooms. And I mean, if anything, maybe it would be more feasible to bring it in centrally to the transportation office or some other part of the organization. I haven't thought a little bit about where else it could sit and couldn't really come up with anything logical. You know, the advantage of doing it that way would be then you just have a central pool of subs and you can sort of send them out where you need to, when you need to, which is how the contractor manages it. You know, and then they have a coordinator, I don't know what her official title is, but manager basically for the whole setup. And when things really get bad, she goes out and does it herself, which is sort of what we do, right? In transportation, for example, if we're really short on bus assistance, some of us will just go hop on a bus and help. And so, you know, the more things like that we bring in-house, the more we kind of set ourselves up for having to, you know, ultimately be responsible when, particularly, I think that the sub issue is one of the hardest. It's just, you know, it creates that added sort of day-to-day stress of having to make sure everything is covered. And then, of course, we would also have to figure out whether we did it with schools or centrally. We'd have to learn for ourselves how crossing guards work and how they're trained and how they get sort of managed. We'd have to develop that expertise, but you know, it's doable if that's a priority.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Board Member Opperman, go ahead.
I wanted to bring up an idea that's extremely old, and some of you may never remember it, but there was a time in elementary schools when the oldest class, there was crossing guard captain type people. Now, I don't know if that was with fifth graders or sixth graders, But on quieter streets, where we worried about managing, younger ones crossing, whether that's a possibility. I mean, it was over here on Falmouth Street at Clifford. I know, I've remembered the days. And so it's just a thought. And another committee is looking at volunteerism, but just, a responsibility, student community responsibility thought needs supervision. So you're not out of that piece. But as we move forward, maybe that's something not to.
Thank you. Thank you for that. All right. I will say that I think on this one as well, I appreciate and I think that the staff recommendation makes a lot of sense. I'm seeing head nod, and seems like the conversation has really coalesced around that. So I will take this opportunity to start winding us down and just appreciate. I mean, so much content today, so much good information. I understand. I can only imagine how much time it took to put that together. Thank you so much for doing that. It was really useful for me, at least. And I think, based on the conversation that we've had in this committee meeting, it seems like it was for other people as well. So we're going to do this. We're going to end on time. Last call for any questions, comments, concerns.
Comment. Thank you very much. I mirror Sarah's Brighton's comments about, it's a lot of work, and I appreciate all the investigation you've been doing to answer our questions. It's really important to us, and I appreciate it.
Yes. So I would be looking for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Board Member Opperman, and a second. Thank you, Board Member Lena, and show of hands for adjournment. We are adjourned at 8:28 p.m. Thank you so much. Have a lovely evening, everybody. Bye-bye.